Everything is set, she thought. By the time he knows what hit him, it will too late and he will no longer be a part of this family then. My daughter can be with someone deserving of her. The woman looked down, snatching the framed photograph of her daughter with that loser. She sneered as she thought, an engineer of all things. She could have married so much higher, someone with power and money unlike her father. Well, she'll have her chance yet again, whether she wants it or not. The woman stared into the mirror and was astonished at the old personage looking back. She cringed at the wrinkles that adorned her once beautiful face, the gray that insidiously crept into the once lustrous blonde hair. She turned away and smirked. No matter, her daughter will succeed where she failed. She just needed a little push. Now that her two granddaughters were grown and out of the house, there was no longer reason to wait. It was time to take out the trash. I want you out of this house now. I calmly looked at my wife of 22 years and shook my head. She was still a knockout, standing just under 5 feet 11 inches, her blonde hair cascading over those sleek shoulders and slender waist. I always knew Dani had a temper, a lot like her fly-off-the-handle, knee-jerk reactive mother, but normally she would have calmed down by now. I say normally with tongue in cheek. This time, she was pulling out all the stops. Ain't gonna happen, Dani. Now, you want to tell me what I did wrong this time? My wife stood there, her deep blue eyes radioactive with rage. Don't give me that I'm innocent routine. You know damn well what you did. I am not going to live with a liar and a cheat. That's good to hear, Dani. Neither will I. What did your mother do this time? My mother has nothing to do with this. You have humiliated me for the last time. Get out, get out. No, I said coolly. This is my home and I am not going anywhere just because you say so. If you don't want to be with me or in the same house with me, then you can leave. As for me, I'm gonna grab a beer, go into the family room, sit down and watch the ball game. You are more than welcome to watch the game with me. When you're ready to calmly discuss whatever heinous crime I've done, I'll be all ears. Dani screamed a few unintelligible and several unmentionable phrases, and I watched as those incredibly long and slender legs turned and stomped off to the bedroom. Seconds later, the house shook on its foundation when the bedroom door slammed shut, followed by the metallic click as she locked the door. Like that would ever keep me out. I kicked back in my favorite chair, an old moth-eaten green fabric lazy boy, smiled as I popped the tab on my beer, hearing that distinctive hiss, and switched on the cable. I know, you'd think I'd be upset or worried about whatever was jammed up Dani's, but I just didn't care. There was a time when I would have, when we first started dating and maybe the first couple of years of marriage, but not now. After 22 plus years of her temper and indignation coupled with raising 2 wildcat daughters, I learned how to tune out irritating noise. I clicked on the game and grinned as Hunter snagged a high fly ball all the way to the back 40. If you're wondering why I don't act upset, it's because, for the past month, she's been a real shrew. Screaming like an Irish banshee was her current volume control. I wondered if McKinsey, Rawls and Forrest Incorporated may have some on-site work needed out of country. Between innings, I began speculating Dani's mother was behind this latest tirade, like she's been with most of the others. That woman has caused more heartache and trouble for my family than Sherman's March to the Sea. Dani's mom, Broomhilda, that's not really her name. It's Olivia Matilda Dreyfus. One woman I have never gotten along with. Well, actually, she hates my guts and I really have no idea why. Usually, it's the father that has a problem with his daughter's boyfriends, fiancé, and, eventually, husband, but Dani's dad, Harvey, and I got along famously. But her mother, given the opportunity, she'd hire a hitman. I guess she always believed her baby deserved better than settling on little Olmi. Of course, I don't help much. After a decade of her shit, I began to give as much as I received, which didn't help my loving relationship with Dani, but it always seemed to put a smile on her father's normally cheerless face. I started dating Dani just before graduating from Cal State. I had spent nearly 4 grueling years studying mechanical engineering. I wanted to build things like buildings, bridges, and stuff. Dani was majoring in taking nothing but general education and only those courses required by state. Dani was bright, but she was no rocket scientist and was always the first to admit it. But you had to admire that she at least believed in a strong education, if not in a particular study. I first spied Dani in the university library. She was with 2 other drop-dead gorgeous women, and I was completely and hopelessly infatuated with her. And I was completely and hopelessly unable to meet her. When it came to exceptionally beautiful women, I always became tongue-tied and a klutz. I had girlfriends in high school and during the first couple of years in Cal State, and they were pretty but not stunning beauties like Dani and her entourage. Anytime I took a girl out, I would always make sure she had a good time. Word got out I was a class act, and any girl that went out with me never had to worry about compulsory bedroom gymnastics. I always made sure they felt comfortable with no further obligations, such as sex, though I did get my share. Another reason for my sterling reputation. I'm not a total schmuck. Standing at 6 feet, 185 pounds dripping wet, my deep green eyes and black curly hair reflected my heritage. Because of my natural tan complexion, somewhere in the mix may be some Native American blood. Who knows? If my looks didn't give you a clue as to my ancestry, my name would Michael Patrick O'Flynn, and was always called by my namesake, my grandfather, Michael. He was Big Mike, and my 5 brothers and 2 of my 3 sisters always called me Little Mike. Only my mother, father, and Caitlin, my closest sister, called me Patrick, after my mother's brother and my uncle, Patrick Cooley. Patrick Sean Cooley died a month after I was born, killed in the line of duty trying to stop the robbery and assault of a young woman while serving the Los Angeles Police Department. Other than a few scrapes and bruises, the woman survived the assault, but my uncle took 2 slugs to his chest. This was before Kevlar vests were required. The victim said my uncle was able to snap off 3 rounds, killing the suspect as he was falling, 2 in the chest and 1 to the head. In his honor, my mother and father always called me Patrick. My friends knew me as Pat. And no, I didn't heed the call to protect and serve, but I always maintained a deep appreciation for those wearing the badge. Not just for my uncle, but for 3 brothers and 1 sister. They all wore the blue, the toughest of the bunch probably my sister, Caitlin. I digress. Returning to Danny, I instantly lost my heart to the woman I was determined to marry, and I proceeded to make a lasting impression on her. Blinded by the newly discovered love of my life, I tripped over someone's backpack, tumbled forward, striking my head on a table corner. When I came around, I was laying on a bed, in a dark room, the sound of a series of short beeps rattling through my skull like a herd of charging rhinos. I tried lifting my head to see where I was, and was instantly miserable for doing so. My head felt like it was clamped in a vice as someone cranked down on the lever. Falling back, I heard a worried voice softly say, "Don't try to move. You took a bad hit to your head when you fell into that table." This time, I didn't try to see who owned those comforting words. I didn't even attempt to speak as I quickly passed out. I guess it was morning because when I awoke, there was daylight. Moaning, I tried to rub my head and had my hand smacked. "Don't touch the dressing," ordered a rough but feminine snarl. Opening my eyes, I saw what could only be Nurse Ratched from One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. She was attractive and blonde and wore one of those old-fashioned hats I always thought looked like tiny folded paper boats, the kind I used to float down the gutter. She looked to be around 40 with a permanent frown attached to that pretty face. "Mr. O'Flynn, I will not tolerate any attempts to touch and or disturb your head dressing. Do I make myself clear?" I nodded meekly and made sure both hands were resting at my side. "Thank you," she snapped and turned, leaving the room. "She can be a bit much," a soft voice muttered. "Nurse Alcock nearly tore my head off when I touched your cheek." I turned toward the voice and was startled to see the reason for my demise standing by my bed. Danny Dreyfus stood by the railing, her fingers twisted in the bars, staring down at me. "How are you feeling?" Better." I was at a loss for words. "You look better. Your color has come back. You took a nasty fall, and your head struck the corner of that table. I think you tripped over someone's backpack. It shouldn't have been so far out in the aisleway." Why are you here?" I asked, stunned that such a beautiful girl would be. She bit her lower lip, something I found she did when nervous, and I always adored it. "I felt sorry and wanted to check up on you. And I think you're cute. I've seen you around the campus a number of times and always wanted to meet you but was too shy. And you never seemed to notice me. Anytime I saw you, your nose was buried in a book. Sorry about that. I never knew. Believe me, I could never have ignored anybody as gorgeous as you. In fact, I didn't say anything further because I didn't want to sound any goofier than I already was." "In fact, what?" she asked, her eyes showing curiosity. I really don't want to say," I said, chiding myself for my mistake. She took my hand and held it, asking me to please tell her. As I looked into those sky blue eyes, I melted. Since I've known her, I have never been able to resist those precious eyes of hers. "It was because of you I tripped and fell in the library." Her eyes opened wide with shock at my statement. "What?" I smiled and quietly said, "Yeah, when I turned and saw you for the first time standing there with your friends, I lost my balance and fell. The next thing I know, I'm waking up here. I'm sorry, but I get kinda klutzy around beautiful girls," and I stopped talking. Danny was staring at me with a huge smile. You think I am beautiful? Danny, I think you are the most exquisite and extraordinary girl these eyes have ever seen. I wanted to meet you, but, well, you saw. Giggling, she said, yes, I saw. When Danny realized she had giggled at my accident, a horrified look emerged and she began apologizing. Oh God, Patrick, I'm so sorry. This isn't funny. You were badly hurt, and the campus nurse thought you had suffered a concussion. Oh shit. Embarrassed, Danny ran from the room. Feeling bad, I never had a chance to thank her for being with me, but I suddenly comprehended she called me Patrick. How did she know I went by my middle name? Once out of the hospital, I summoned the courage to find Danny and ask her out. Our relationship turned into a whirlwind courtship. Luckily, I graduated with honors and was immediately hired by a well-known engineering and development company, McKinsey, Rawls & Forrest Incorporated. I started at the bottom of the heap, but I could have cared less. It was a great firm and I was doing what I've always wanted to do, build things. Simple as that. I remember the first time I met Danny's parents, Harvey and Olivia, and quickly understood who my competition would be, her mother. A beautiful woman, Olivia was gracious enough the first time we met, but I felt the underlying antipathy toward me. Exhibiting a brilliant smile, her eyes, nevertheless, revealed repulsion for her daughter's boyfriend and possible future fiancé. Harvey, on the other hand, seemed taken with me. Friendly and extremely gracious, Harvey would take me by the arm and escort me into his sanctuary, his den. There, we would smoke his Cubans, have a beer or two, and talk baseball or football. He never spoke of a favorite team. He loved them all. There were times Danny would have to kidnap me from her father. However, Danny's mom was the polar opposite of Harvey. Rarely would she speak to me, and most times refused to acknowledge my presence. Of course, I really didn't mind much. I may have been shy around beautiful women once, but I was no wallflower when it came to Danny and me. Plus, my rather boisterous and opinionated family had long given me the confidence to make my way in the world, to feel good about myself. So, nothing Danny's mom could do or say ever shook my faith and trust in myself or Danny, and, believe me, she tried. I don't know how many times Olivia tried to set her daughter up with one of those haughty silver spoons from the proper side of town. To satisfy her mother, Danny did go out with a few of these spoiled rich egg suckers, but after her date, she would always come back to me. As I made my bones at McKinsey, Rawls & Forrest, Inc., I rose quickly in the firm. They soon discovered not only was I a competent designer and engineer, but I had a knack for getting the job done before deadline. I was good with people, particularly with the men and women who gave their sweat, labor, and, at times, their blood on site. I soon became a project manager and was usually given those ventures that proved difficult for other managers. My reputation as a troubleshooter grew, and with it, my income. Without saying anything to Danny, I began looking at houses as a home for the two of us. I hadn't asked her to marry me yet, but I was pretty confident she would say yes. I hadn't counted on the wildebeest. One warm evening, Danny and I were sitting on the beach, listening to the gently lapping of the waves against the surf. Holding her in my arms, she nuzzled her face into my neck and shoulders. I could smell the sweet essence of flowers in her hair as I kissed those golden locks. Danny? Without moving her head, she whispered, "Yes, Patrick." She always liked calling me Patrick. "Will you?" "Will I what?" "Would you marry me?" "What?" With my right hand, I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a small black box. She straightened up, her eyes wide, and stared. "Danny, would you do the honor of becoming my wife?" In my hand, I held the box out to her. Her shoulders began to tremble as I opened the box, revealing a shiny white gold band with a 3¼ carat marquise cut diamond. While she gazed at the ring, I carefully removed the band. Taking her left hand, I looked into her eyes. "Danny, will you marry me?" "Yes, yes, yes," she cried as I slipped the ring over her finger. She delicately fingered the band and then launched herself into my arms. Her entire body quivered as she silently wept. "I began to think you were never going to ask me," she sniffled. "I thought my mother had frightened you from ever wanting to marry me. I am so happy I was wrong," she sobbed. I gently took her chin in my grasp and lifted her face. Her eyes wet from tears, I leaned and softly kissed her lips. Pulling back, I said, "Nothing could have kept me from marrying you. Danny, you are so precious to me. I love you so much that, at times, it hurts to breath. Oh, dear God, I love you so much," she cried and pulled me tight against her. Our lips again crushed together. I did the old-fashioned thing and asked her father for her hand in marriage, which he gladly gave his approval. I think to piss of Danny's mother. When we announced our engagement, my clan held the mother of celebrations. With great reluctance, Olivia accompanied Harvey to the O'Flynn home where they came to comprehend the magnitude of their latest addition to the Dreyfus family. All of the O'Flynns and the Cooleys were there. Both my mother and father came from large families and were known for their longevity. Hell, even my great-great-grandfather, Seamus Michael O'Flynn, was still alive at 98. He couldn't get around much, but the great patriarch still had a terrific thirst for the amber liquid, and it, of course, had to be Irish whiskey. Danny's family wasn't so big and nowhere near as diverse. They came from money, old money. Harvey's family wasn't small. He had 2 brothers and 1 sister, but both his parents had passed away. Olivia was an only child survived by her estranged father, his whereabouts unknown. Like her mother, Danny was also an only child. The one hiccup in our engagement was in selection of churches for the wedding. Danny was of a Methodist upbringing and I, well, as Roman Catholic as my Irish heritage can be. The solution came from Danny. We would be first married early morning in her church and immediately rushed off to my family's church minutes afterwards, the reception to be held on neutral ground, a large ballroom of a very old and extremely popular hotel. I didn't confide to Danny that my mother's youngest brother was owner of said hotel. The weddings and the reception went off without a hitch. The Protestant church was small, but filled to capacity. The wedding a quiet, brief, and gracious affair. The O'Flynn church was grand and also filled to capacity. The wedding was long and garrulous as most Catholic weddings are, full of rituals and procedures. However, we managed to survive. The reception, however, was another animal entirely. Lively and loud, complete with spirited entertainment and music coupled with a smattering of rowdy and energetic congratulations toward the bride and groom. A typical Irish Donnybrook. Danny and I were finally able to sneak out just after 2 in the morning. I later heard the party continued until well after 4 in the morning. We spent our honeymoon in Hawaii, as far away from any living relations as possible, and had a wonderful and very sensual time. I have no doubt, Katie was conceived on Kauai in a quaint little bed and breakfast inn. 2 years later, Ashlyn was born. Katie was the image of her mother with full blonde curls and deep blue eyes. Ashlyn was with wavy black hair and the deepest emerald eyes I've ever seen. Along with Danny, both were my life. Over the years, the girls took after Danny with their extraordinary beauty and grace. My wife taught them well the ways of men and how to read them. Katie was the princess, and many a time I had to suffer the anxieties of fatherhood when it came to boys calling on her. Katie became the most popular in school and went through all the trappings of a beautiful young woman. She became head cheerleader and queen of the prom. But, because of her mother, Katie never lost herself in her popularity. She always remained level-headed. Ashlyn definitely displayed my side of the family. She was a tomboy, rambunctious and full of energy. Several of my brothers taught her the art of self-defense, and she became extremely proficient in the study of Aikido and Taekwondo. By the time she turned 16, Ashlyn was 3rd-level black belt and boasted over a dozen trophies from her matches. She was also bilingual in French and Spanish, the French from her mother and Spanish from my sister, Caitlin. Because of her job with the LAPD, Caitlin believed being proficient in Spanish would be extremely helpful. Ash was now currently studying Mandarin Chinese, please don't ask me why. Also a gorgeous creature, with her father's dark features and deep green eyes. Her black hair cascading to the small of her back, Ashlyn broke many a heart. Ashlyn was also Katie's protector, whether Katie wanted it or not. It was years later when I found out, but during the last week of Katie's senior year, she had gone with several of her friends for a senior ditch day. Unknown to her, her friends had made plans to meet with some boys at a beach house. While there, Katie was talked into drinking a glass of wine, but she didn't know one of the boys had spiked the bottle with a little concoction of his own, a mixture of X and just a pinch of a well-known date assault drug. Soon, all 3 girls were under its effects and quickly taken advantage. There was a fight among the 4 boys regarding Katie. They all wanted first crack at her. The biggest of the bunch won out and swept the semi-conscious girl into his arms and strolled into a back bedroom. As he set Katie on the bed, he heard a loud crash and screaming come from the front room. He grinned thinking the guys were fighting over the other 2 girls and leaned down over the Katie. Just as he was about to undress her, the bedroom door slammed open. "What the hell?" he bellowed and turned, surprised to find a young black-haired beauty standing in the doorway dressed in an old pair of torn jeans, a black t-shirt with SWAT stenciled across the chest, and a worn pair of work boots. The young man smiled and said, "You'll have to wait your turn, cutie. Just give me a few minutes." The doctor would later tell his parents, the boy suffered a fractured jaw, 2 broken ribs, and may lose his left testicle. All 4 boys were arrested for possession of drugs, drugging the girls, attempted assault, and sexual molestation. The parents of the boys thought about suing for injuries to their sons, but their attorneys advised against it. After all, it wouldn't look very good to see 4 large young college jocks taken down by a slight 16-year-old girl. I never heard the full story until much later. When the incident occurred, I was in Southeast Asia building a bridge over a large gorge in the middle of a godforsaken jungle so that an American oil company could have access to oil-rich land. When I returned home, all I was told was several boys had tried to make some inappropriate advances on Katie and her friends, and the boys were punished for it. It wasn't until 2.5 years later I found out the truth. My sister, Caitlin, had finally told me what happened. She told me after Ash's graduation from high school. Caitlin thought it was safe to finally clue me in as to what really took place. She didn't think I would do anything about it. Was she ever wrong? But that's another story. By now both girls were out of the house. Katie had graduated from USC in Fine Arts and Design and had already landed a position with an up-and-coming LA design studio. Ash was currently attending MIT, her goal, to follow her father's footsteps, much to the disappointment to Caitlin and my brothers. With her skills, they hoped she would enter law enforcement. Actually, I was surprised by her choice of careers. When Ash told me, I couldn't have been prouder. Danny always liked to say, I had tears in my eyes. Maybe. The home seemed so empty after the girls were gone. It was hard for me, but it must have been terrible for Danny. When Katie was born, much to Olivia's distress, Danny became a remain-at-home mom. With my salary, we could well afford it. However, Olivia was incensed. She was compelled to remind her daughter she was losing her independence, her freedom. There were times I could see the seeds of discontent in Danny's eyes, but for the most part, she was a loving and fiercely loyal mother. Now, with the girls away and I always working, I worried Danny would start listening to that harpy. And after today, I was right. When the game ended, I moved into the den and did some last-minute work on some designs for a new high-rise in Orange County. I could hear Danny fervently moving about in the bedroom and could hear water running. She must be preparing a bath, I thought. I heard the bedroom door open and 2 loud thumps in the hallway. The door closed, again followed by the door lock. Curious, I got up and walked into the hallway. Sitting there in front of the bedroom door were my 2 suitcases. I didn't have to figure out what was in them. Shaking my head, I approached the door and turned the knob. Locked. I knocked on the door and said, Danny, please let me in. We really need to discuss whatever is bothering you. I have nothing to say. Now take the hint and leave. Oh, this was going to be fun, I thought. I stepped back a few paces and lifted my foot, kicking the door. My brothers had taught me the proper way to kick in a door. The bedroom door exploded inward, followed by a high-pitched scream. As the door flew open, I picked up the 2 suitcases, walked in and tossed them onto the bed. Danny was cowering by the nightstand as I began unpacking. Taking my time, I deliberately made sure each and every item she had tossed into those 2 cases were returned to their original location. Without saying a word, I grabbed a clean pair of boxers and a t-shirt, my usual sleeping attire, and moved into the bathroom. Once done, I returned and slid into bed. Danny hadn't moved. God damn you, Patrick! She growled and stomped into the bathroom, slamming the door shut. She was good at that. I smiled before I fell asleep. She was always sexy when angry. The next morning, I awoke to silence. Turning over, I could see that Danny didn't come to bed. No small surprise. When I got up, the house was empty. Danny wasn't home. On the kitchen counter, I found a simple white envelope. This wasn't good. Opening it, I removed a single-page letter. Patrick, I can no longer live with you. Since you won't leave, I must. I have moved in with Mom and Dad. Knowing how you feel about my mother, moving in with her should make your day. You want to know why I hate you? One word, Crystal. Try explaining that away. And don't try and deny it. Crystal admitted everything, and she had pictures. I am filing for divorce. I thought you loved me, but now I see everything. You will hear from my attorney. At least, I'll be fair. The house will be sold and everything will be split down the middle. Since the girls are of age, we won't have to worry about them, but I do expect you to continue with Ashlyn's college expenses. Please don't fight me on this. I don't want to make this any uglier than you've already made it. Don't try to contact me. If you do, I'll be forced to get a restraining order on you. Mother has already tried to convince me to do so. You'll be pleased to know, my father doesn't believe you've cheated on me. I guess men always stick together. I will tell the girls we have separated and will be getting a divorce, but I will not tell them why. I'll leave that little tidbit for you. Goodbye, Danny. P.S. I guess Mother was right all along. Pictures? Crystal? What the hell was she talking about? This sounds a lot like her mother, I thought. Okay, first things first, Crystal. Crystal was one of Danny's closest friends from high school. They still kept in touch, but I never cared for the woman. She was always eyeballing me, sizing me up like a side of beef. Last year, during a Halloween party at our home, I was down in the cellar getting more beer when Crystal appeared. She slithered toward me wearing a sexy rendition of Elvira, the mistress of the dark costume. Patrick, where have you been all night? Ready to fall prey to the mistress of the dark? Crystal purred. She slinked along until she was against me. Crystal, what do you think you're doing? Oh, come on, Pat. You know you want some of this. She slipped one hand behind my neck and pulled me down as she stood up to kiss me. Forcefully, I yanked away from her bodice and pushed her back. Startled, Crystal glared at me as I said, Crystal, I love my wife. I have no desire for you or anyone else for that matter. You're Danny's friend and I'll always consider you as such, but, for your sake, don't ever be around me again. Understand? Nodding meekly, she whispered, I'm sorry. Yes, I understand, and left. Nothing was ever said about that little come on. When I called Crystal's apartment, there was no answer. I figured as much, but what neither Danny nor Crystal realized. I knew where she worked. Crystal was a dancer and stripper for the gentlemen's club on the outskirts of town. At 2 o'clock in the morning, I waited outside the club, next to her little red spider. The side door smacked open and the girls started piling out, followed by their escorts, the bouncers. When Crystal saw me standing by her car, she said something to two rather large men who glared at me. When they came toward me, I continued to lean on the fender of Crystal's car. What the hell you doing here, a-hole? You got 10 seconds to get the hell out of here before I rip your head off and shit down your neck. The largest of the two stooges bellowed at me. Just as he was about to grab me, several lights spilled over the area and the sound of a couple of shotgun action filed back loading shells echoed through the parking lot. The two bully boys froze. What the hell? I didn't pay any attention to the two bouncers as I approached Crystal, who by now was frozen. When one of the bouncers moved toward me, Caitlin stepped out of the shadows and said, I wouldn't. He gasped as he stared at the diminutive-sized woman, holding a bad shit-looking Benelli semi-auto 12-gauge shotgun. Opposite him, two large men stepped out from behind a parked truck, one holding a similar weapon. On your stomachs now, my brother Brian ordered. Both bouncers dropped like stones to the pavement. Well, long time no see, Crystal. How have you been? How did you find me? She whispered. Shit, Crystal. I make it my business to know about my wife's friends. What? You forgot my brothers and sister are cops in this city? You that stupid? She looked around frantically until suddenly, her shoulders slumped and closed her eyes. Sighing, she opened them and looked at me. What do you want? You already know the answer to that one. Which? Who put you up to this and where did you get the photos? Shit, Patrick, you already know who's behind it. She's hated you from day one for taking her baby girl away. As for the pictures, digital magic. Olivia hired some guy to follow you around and take pictures. Once he got a few good ones, he took some of me and merged them. Not bad either. I kept one because I've always wanted you. How much? I asked. 10K. Olivia paid you 10,000 to set me up? Yep, that is one vengeful witch. I played up to Danny 4 weeks back. Once I showed Danny the pictures and told her about our little affair, dear sweet Olivia paid me the money. I gotta say, it took a lot of convincing to get Danny to believe me. I couldn't have done it without the photos. Even then, she didn't want to. I told her I've always had a thing for you, and seduced you a couple of years back. We had this off and on tryst during those 2 years. Patrick, she wanted to kill me. She was so devastated. Who was the photographer? Don't know. Some shyster PI, I think. Olivia's the one that gave me the pictures. So, what are you gonna do now, Patrick? I am not gonna say anything to Danny, and I know you won't hurt me. There's nothing you can do to convince her I was lying. I smiled and reached in my shirt pocket. Her sneer vanished when she saw the recorder. She screamed, "You son of a witch." Crystal, I'd be real careful what you say about my mother. I won't hurt you, but I can't answer for my sister Caitlin. You remember Caitlin, don't you? Crystal nervously glanced at my sister holding the Benelli. Now, you'd better listen and listen very carefully, Crystal. I've got you on some major shit. You conspired to commit several felonies. I think it would be in your best interest to play along. Let's face it, you witch, I've got you by your short hairs. What do you want me to do? Nothing, absolutely nothing for now. I want you to remain out of sight. Don't say anything to anybody, especially Olivia or Danny. Understand? Crystal reluctantly nodded. Patrick, you should know this. Olivia has Ted Bowman sniffing around Danny. She's hired him to seduce her. Olivia believes that once Danny gives in to Ted, there is no way you'll forgive her. She's right about that. Does her father know anything about what's been going on? Crystal laughed and said, Pooh, Lise, that poor man doesn't know anything about what your mother-in-law does. Why he stays with her is a mystery. Okay, thanks for the heads up. Now, do your part and stay hidden. Crystal nodded. I turned and shrugged at my sister and brothers. Just as quickly as they appeared, they vanished. The two bouncers slowly got up, still a little worried as I left. Going over my mental checklist, I thought, Crystal is taken care of. Now Ted Bowman. Ted would be easy. Fast cars, hot women, booze and drugs. He was into all of it. His parents have paid a small fortune to bail him out over the years, and it cost them a small fortune to make certain charges disappear. Besides his looks, good old Ted did have one thing in his favor, his inheritance when his old man croaked. Something Olivia wanted her claws hooked into, and Danny was the bait. As I said, Ted did have the looks. He was tall with long wavy blonde hair and gray eyes. The 40-year-old youngster spent most of his time either at the gym or on the tennis court so he could maintain his muscular physique. Daniel Philip Bowman considered himself a hot item for the ladies, leaving a trail of broken hearts and marriages, and Danny was evidently his next quarry. Bowman loves to drive expensive cars and presently drove around in a silver Bentley Continental GTC convertible. My brother, Brian, managed to stop him for running a red light and issued the a-hole a citation. Brian laughed when he told me he nearly took the dunce to jail for refusing to sign the ticket. He actually had Ted cuffed and in the back of his patrol car when shithead finally agreed to sign the citation. I guess you have to let these idiots go when they decide to sign instead of going to jail. That night, I sat just down the street from my in-laws and waited. Sure enough, a silver-blue Bentley convertible pulled into the driveway, that scum bucket driving. Activating the camcorder, I watched him get out of the car, saunter up to the front door and knock. Soon, the door opened and the Wicked Witch of the West appeared. I smiled as Olivia smiled and hugged the shithead and vanished when Danny materialized. She smiled at that piece of shit as he took her hand and kissed it, Olivia with a pasty shit-eating grin. Holding her hand, Bowman led her to his car and Danny slid in after he opened the passenger door for her. I saw Olivia wave and yell for the loving couple to have a good time. This was getting better and better. Thankfully, his car was facing the same direction as mine, so it was easy to follow them. Olivia had already gone back inside as I passed the house. I trailed them to downtown and dear old Ted pulled into the parking lot of a posh nightclub, the Ritz Playpen. Danny and I had been there once, but we weren't impressed. The club was expensive and packed with spoiled, pretentious rich kids having fun on daddy's dime. I parked further down the street and paid the outlandish cover charge. Once inside, it wasn't hard to spot the two lovebirds. Well, so far one lovebird. Danny didn't seem awed by Teddy Boy. Every time he would put his arm around her shoulders or waist, she would nonchalantly remove it, but the dumb shit wouldn't take the hint. After a round of drinks, she loves her Chardonnay. He led her onto the dance floor to a fast number. God, after 20-plus years, Danny still took my breath away. She moved with the grace of a gazelle as she danced to the music. Just as the band neared the end of the piece, Teddy Boy moved behind her and tried to spoon with some dirty dancing. Didn't work. The moment she felt him close in, she walked off the floor. I grinned as he frowned, watching her retreating to their booth. Once they were back at their table, Teddy Boy ordered another round. Suddenly, Ted had to slide out of the booth to allow Danny out to go to the ladies' room. While she was gone, the waitress brought the drinks. After the waitress left, Ted removed something from his pocket. He fiddled around with the object until he held over the glass of wine. I couldn't see if anything fell in, but I did see him stir the goblet with his pinky. That prick was going to drug Danny. I looked around the room and spied a disheveled-looking young man hanging onto the bar. Approaching, I whispered in his ear if he would like to make a quick 50. At first the guy looked at me like I was queer, but when I explained what I wanted, he smiled evilly and nodded. Slipping him a 20, I told him he would get the rest afterwards, and the young man nodded. Danny was pushing her way through the crowd and had just settled back into the booth. Loverboy didn't have a chance to sit down when my appointed assassin arrived, and in the nick of time, Danny was about to sip from her glass. My paid drunk, at least he was to act as such, stumbled into Ted, spilling his drink all over Ted's silk shirt and jacket. Bowman exploded and pushed the drunk away, screaming, "You a hole! That's my best shirt, you piece of..." Poor Ted never got the chance to finish his tirade. My interloper got pissed and grabbed Bowman, throwing him on the table. Danny jumped back, her glass flying as the wine spilled all over Ted Bowman. Shit, I couldn't have planned this any better. The young man now had a grip on Ted's jacket and was pummeling Ted pretty good before the bouncers arrived and pulled my hired gun off the struggling man. They dragged the angry young man through the throng of looky-losers and hustled him out the front door. Ted, by this time, was up and Danny was trying to console him as she applied towels to his drenched shirt. Ted grabbed her hand and pulled her out of the club. Following, I saw them rush to the parking attendant. Was that okay? I turned around and saw my drunk standing there with a huge grin. That was outstanding, I said. Here's an even 100. That performance should have gotten an Oscar. What did the bouncers do? Nothing. I know them all. They're good friends of mine. They just got me out of there in case your friend decided to take it further. Thanks for the cash, man. Anytime you need another performance, give me a call. You got it. By the way, what's your name? Dalton. Bill Dalton, at your service. Dalton grinned as he bowed and handed me a card before leaving. The card read, William D. Dalton, Dalton Investigations, 1345, Falling Leaf Avenue, Barrington, California. I laughed when I realized this guy was a private investigator. He might come in handy after all. By the time I reached my car, Ted's Bentley was just pulling out of the parking facility. I dropped down behind the truck as Ted roared by. With Ted's pissed attitude, I doubt Danny noticed my truck. Hopping in, I took off after them, but the a-hole was so bent, he was long gone before I got up to speed. I decided I would go back to her parents' home and wait. When I arrived, the Bentley was already in the driveway, but both Bowman and Danny were not in the car. They must already be inside. No sooner had I thought that, the front door opened and Bowman came out with Olivia in pursuit. I watched as they spoke, Teddy boy nodding as Olivia became animated. After several minutes of this, Olivia smiled and hugged the shithead before he was finally able to break away and get in his car. Olivia stood there frantically waving as the Bentley backed out and left. Shit, Olivia, why don't you marry the scumsucker, I thought. She probably would, given the chance, but I don't believe Ted would want to have anything to do with that skank, and not just because of their considerable age difference. Olivia turned and walked back to the house, never noticing the truck as I passed. I followed the Bentley convertible as it drove along the freeway until it reached the off-ramp to Notting Hill Boulevard. Ted was going home. I guess he decided he needed a drink because the Bentley pulled into the parking lot of Dante's Den, a local dive. I strolled into the bar and found Teddy boy sitting in a booth with a busty-looking platinum blonde sitting on his lap. He had his head buried so into her, he never noticed as I sat across from him. The double Ds did take notice, tapping him on the shoulder. When Ted came up for air, his bosom companion pointed in my direction. "Who the hell are you, a-hole?" he snarled as the blonde deftly removed herself from the table. I calmly said, "Let's start on a friendly beginning, shall we? You've already had one fight. You really want to mix it up again?" He stared at me for a while before answering, "What do you want?" "That's better. What does Olivia Dreyfus want from you regarding her daughter, Danny?" Surprise flashed across his face before he regained his cool exterior. "I don't know what you're talking about, and I don't know any Olivia." I grabbed him by the throat and wrenched him across the table. "Listen, shit for brains. You went out tonight with my wife, Danny O'Flynn." With that statement, his eyes grew enormous. "I know Olivia is behind it, and you're going to tell me everything, understand?" I squeezed his neck and watched as his face began to turn a nasty shade of purple. Releasing him, Ted grabbed his throat and gasped for air. In a whisper, he said, "What do you want to know?" "Everything," I growled. "Mrs. Dreyfus, Olivia, left a message asking me to call her. When I did, she asked if I remembered her daughter, Danny. I told her of course I remembered her from high school and college. Several times, I tried to get her to go out with me, but she was going with some local boy at the time. Mrs. Dreyfus told me Danny was seeking a divorce from her husband for cheating on her, and that maybe I might be interested in seeing her again. If I was, she could set it up for me. Strange thing was, she wanted me to really put the moves on her daughter, to seduce her, and she would compensate my time and effort. Of course I agreed. I have always dreamed on getting into bed with Danny. I stared at this lousy excuse for a man and asked, "Why would you need to be compensated? You've already got money." "No, not really. My father keeps me on a small stipend now. He only gives me enough to survive on. Hell, the Bentley's my father's. Any extra cash helps." So, of course I agreed. Who was I to argue against a mother that wanted her daughter to have a good time on her dime? Mrs. Dreyfus was the one that set up the date tonight. "What did you put in her wine?" "Huh." I saw the knowing look in his eyes, but he was playing dumb. "Listen, shithead. We can do this easy like, or I can kick your nuts so hard you're gonna feel them against the back of your teeth. Okay, yeah. I slipped her a little concoction. I don't know what it was. Her mother gave it to me in case I needed to loosen her up a bit. Never did find out if it would have worked. Some a-hole drunk. Ted looked at me, his eyes wide. You did that, didn't you? I smiled but didn't answer. Okay, a-hole, here's what you're going to do. I want you to keep up the ruse of trying to seduce Danny. He shook his head and said, hell, this family is whacked. First her mother and now her husband. What is it with you two? He stopped jabbering when he saw my face. Let me finish, shithead. First, I want you to keep Olivia happy knowing you're going after her daughter. She knows if Danny has an affair with you, it will mean the end of our marriage. That is what this is all about. Second, I want Danny to decide how important our marriage is to her. If you are able to seduce my wife, I will divorce her. You will not tell a soul about what I've said. As far as you're concerned, Olivia thinks she's hired you to screw her daughter and our family. Got it? Ted Bowman gazed at me for a long time before replying, yeah, I got it. I understand. You realize I will screw her, your wife? I've never failed yet. You sure you want this? Glaring at him, I nodded and said, yep, do your best, but don't let on I know what's going on. Now, Ted had a huge grin on his face. Okay, it's a deal. I can't believe this shit. Danny gets laid. I get paid and hubby becomes history. That's about it. Nodding, I said, that's about it. Ted asked one more thing. When I screw your wife, and I will, you're not going to take any action against me? No, you're safe. But you will be named in the divorce should it come to that. And you will tell me where and when you try and seduce her. I held out my hand and said, take this, keep it with you. When you take her out, turn it on and I'll hear everything the two of you say and do. In my palm was a tiny transmitter. Taking the small device, he said, that's cool. You need confirmation. Well, unless you got anything else to say, I am out of here. Ted stood and walked to the entrance, stopped and turned to stare at me. A smile spread across his mug, and he laughed as he stepped out. Shit, I hope I knew what I was doing. What Bowman didn't know was I taped our entire conversation. Before this was over, Olivia Dreyfus was going down for good. I stopped off at my local watering hole, the Hole in the Wall gang, and sucked down a few beers before heading home. It was going to be pretty lonely in that house tonight, but I'd better get used to it. I hit the switch for the garage, and the door began to roll up. Already, the emptiness hit me hard. Danny's Toyota was missing. I sat there for several minutes, tears running down my face before I mustered up the courage to pull in. I grabbed another beer from the frig and sat down in my lazy boy, staring at a blank screen on my 55-inch widescreen. I must have dozed off sitting there because the next thing I knew, the sun was in my face. The house was silent as I slowly pushed myself out of the chair and shuffled into the kitchen. The clock on the microwave displayed 6 a.m. as I switched on the coffee maker. In a matter of seconds, I could hear the water begin to percolate and my life-giving juice start to pour into the pot. I could see myself in the reflection of the microwave door. I would scare vultures off roadkill just by my looks alone. I sat at the kitchen table sipping my brew and thought through my checklist. I've dealt with the witch, Crystal, took care of the shithead, Bowman and I have recordings of both of them. I've got film of Olivia with Bowman, and I managed to get a couple of stills of Danny and Bowman in the booth. I even got a shot of Bowman's hand hovering over Danny's wine glass, and one with his pinky stirring the wine. Now, all I had to do is sit back and wait for Bowman's call. I know you'd think I'd call Danny and try to get her to talk to me, but I am following her wishes. She didn't want to see me or talk to me. Fine, I won't. It was hard not to let her know what I have found out, to show her how her mother set me up. Well, screw her. She wouldn't even give a chance to talk to her. Fine with me. Even when she does discover the truth, our marriage is over. If her love for me is so tenuous, she wouldn't give me a chance to explain, then why bother? Everything I've done so far was for that which of a mother-in-law. She may win in getting rid of me, but before I am done, she's going to lose a hell of a lot more. Finishing my coffee, I hopped into the shower shivering beneath the cold water. I always took a cold shower. Always made me feel fresh and alive afterwards. After a shave and dental hygiene, I felt a lot better. Time to head off to work. Just as I was walking out the door, my cell phone began to play the theme music from an old private eye TV program called Peter Gunn. Dad, where are you? Hey Ash, just heading out the door. Where are you going? I do go to work, darling, or did you forget? Sorry Dad, but I am kinda distressed right now. I talked to Mom last night and she said the two of you had separated and would be getting a divorce. Is that true? What happened? What did you do? She started crying on the phone. Dad, She's really upset and angry with you. Why? Ashlyn, your mother thinks I cheated on her. I said it as simple as I could. Did you? Baby girl, what do you think? No way, Dad. You love Mom too much. Why does she think you cheated? Now, I had a dilemma. Should I tell my daughter what's been going on or just feign ignorance? Ash, I don't know. Your mother won't talk to me. Grandmother has something to do with this, doesn't she? I always said my kids were smart. Can't say, baby. Not yet. Anyway, have you said anything to Katie? Not yet, but I am going to call her after I am done talking with you. She deserves to know. You do realize Katie's going to blame grandmother. Katie hates her more than me, and I loathe the old hag. Ashlyn, I may not get along with Danny's mother, but I won't be having you talk like that. She is still your maternal grandmother, and it would devastate your mother to hear you talk like that. My heart broke when I heard my youngest daughter begin to cry and I said, baby girl, don't worry. It will be all right. Trust me. Daddy, are you sure? Or are you just saying that? Trust me, Ash. Everything will be okay. Make sure you tell Katie that. All right? Between sniffles, Ashlyn said she would. Love ya, Dad. Love you too. Ash, now don't worry. Okay, Dad. I grimaced as she disconnected. I lied to her. I didn't have a clue everything would be fine. In fact, the way I feel right now, Danny could take a flying leap. When I got into work, my secretary, Mary Beth, said Mr. Rawls wanted to see me the moment I came in. Terrific. Now what? Anything I should know about Mary Beth? No, Pat. Not that I know of. Mr. Rawls called personally and sounded okay to me. Actually, he sounded kind of excited. Another project? Maybe just the thing for me. Get me out of here for a while. All these thoughts were running through my head when Mary Beth finally broke through. Pat, hello, Earth to Pat. Sorry about that, Mary Beth. My mind kind of wandered there for a moment. Everything all right, Pat? The girl's okay. Danny? Yeah, everything's fine. I knew I didn't sound very convincing and Mary Beth has an uncanny knack for reading people. Would you tell me if it wasn't? I smiled at her and said, Mary Beth, you're the ethics committee of my conscience. You would be the first to know if anything was wrong, even before I knew. She giggled and told me to stop procrastinating and see Mr. Rawls. A few moments later, I was standing before the Queen, Mrs. Delaney, David Rawls' secretary, or as he likes to say, his boss. Please go on and Pat, they're expecting you. They. Of course, Mr. Mackenzie, Mr. Forrest and David. All three? Mrs. Delaney smiled and just shrugged. As I opened and stepped into David Rawls' office, I was immediately bombarded by greetings from all three. I've been employed by these men as long as I've been married and couldn't have worked for a nicer bunch of guys. Pat, about time you came in. Sit down. We've got some things we need to discuss with you. Please, take a seat. David pointed to an empty chair next to him. They were all seated around a coffee table, resting in leather chairs. As I sat, John Mackenzie began saying, Pat, we've, all three of us, have been very pleased with your performance the past 20 years. I can't tell you how many times you've pulled our butts out of the fire on those overseas projects. Bill Forrest was beaming as he stared at me. Yes, you've been a tremendous benefit for this company. Every man and woman working for us has had nothing but praise for you. I think they would all quit if you ever left. God forbid. David picked up a folder from the coffee table and handed it to me. I opened the packet and stared at the top sheet. As I read the first paragraph, I discovered I was holding my breath. I started getting a little dizzy and gasped for air. My eyes ready to pop out of my skull. I stared at the three men and said, Are you sure about this? There's got to another that is better qualified. All three laughed, Bill Forrest saying, Pay up. Smiling, John Mackenzie reached into his pocket and pulled out a $5 bill, handing it to Bill. Chuckling, David said, Bill bet that you would say that. John foolishly took the bet, but I think it mostly for show. Again, all three laughed. Finally, David said, Pat, without a doubt, you have proven to be the most valuable member of this company since we first hired you. As John said, you have saved this company from disaster on numerous occasions. Everyone looks up to you. Actually, this is overdue. We should have made you partner a long time ago. Will you accept? I was speechless. They were making me a full partner in the firm. I just stared at them. I didn't know what to say. Pat, asked David, you going to be okay? I know this was a lot to handle at once, but we really want you as a partner. You have the respect and admiration of all our clients and our competitors. You didn't know we knew about all the offers you turned down? I shook my head and croaked, I didn't think you knew. When I told them I wasn't interested in leaving, I thought that was the end of it. David smiled and said, Hell, they called us asking if we could loan you out. Of course we refused. You had enough on your plate with us. Your work, reputation, and especially your loyalty to this company is what convinced us to offer you a partnership. I hope you will seriously consider it. Do I have to stay in an office? Pay up, repeated Forrest. Damn it, Pat, you're costing me money, growled Mackenzie good-naturedly. No, we want you to be our eyes, ears, and hands. We figured you would want to keep your hands dirty, so yes, you'll have your own office, but no, you don't have to always be there. But you will have your own executive assistant. Have anyone in mind? I saw the sly looks each one of these men gave one another. Yeah, I do have someone in mind. Mary Beth Winters. David yelled out, Mrs. Delaney, is Pat's personal assistant here yet? Yes, Mr. Rawls. Please send her in. The door opened and in walked Mary Beth wearing a huge smile. Congratulations, Pat. I wanted to tell you so bad, but it would have spoiled the surprise. Plus, I wasn't really sure you would want me as your personal assistant. Thank you. I stood and embraced Mary Beth and said, there is no one here that could put up with me like you. I should thank you for your support. She beamed as I turned to the three ambushers, now standing, and said, thank you. I've loved this company since the first day I started here. What you have done here is way beyond what I deserve or expected. I am proud to be your newest partner. By this time, Mrs. Delaney had entered with a young man who was carrying 6 glasses and a bottle of Dom. Unbelievably, Mrs. Delaney stepped over and hugged me. It's about time these 3 bozos made you partner, Pat. Congratulations. The 3 bozos laughed as the glasses were passed around. David Rawls raised the glass and said, to new partnerships, a long time coming. Mackenzie, Rawls, and Forrest. Mary Beth and Mrs. Delaney raised their glasses and sipped. Then, Mrs. Delaney held her glass high and toasted. To Mackenzie, Rawls, Forrest, and O'Flynn. This time we all raised our glasses and drank. All 3 men shook my hand and patted me on the back as everyone began filing out of the office. Pat, why don't you take some time off, like a month? Get away with Danny on some exotic to celebrate. Mary Beth will have everything ready for you on your return. I thought I hid my misery when suddenly reminded of Danny, but Mary Beth saw right through me. She moved over to me, leaning in, and whispered, later? I nodded, and she smiled as she touched my shoulder. Sounds like a plan, David. I think I'll do just that. John Mackenzie said, good. We don't want to hear from you for at least a month. Oh, and when you return, we just got another project for the company. You'll need to find your replacement. I nodded, again shaking everyone's hand before leaving. Mary Beth caught up to me and, grabbing my arm, yanked me into my new office. Shutting the door, she turned and stared. Okay, out with it. What's going on between you and Danny? I told her. I told her everything. It was as if a dam had burst and all the pent-up water rushed out. By the time I was done, I was nearly in tears. She held me tight as I let everything out. Damn it, Pat. Why won't you tell her what you already know? Asked Mary Beth. Danny didn't cause this. Her mother did. She's punishing you for her mother's hatred for you. She needs to know. No. Danny jumped to her conclusions without confronting me. She already wrote me off without any defense. Now, I discover she went out with another man, with her mother's blessing. No. Goddammit, no. Pat, you know her mother probably forced her to go out with him. That's the problem, Mary Beth. She won't stand up to her mother. I am surprised she ever married me. Well, she's going to find out just how much her dear mother loves her and our family. Okay, Pat, okay. Just remember, she loves you. I nodded but didn't reply. Mary Beth leaned up and kissed me on the cheek and whispered, don't worry, everything will be okay. Trust me. I just smiled. Those were the very words I said to Ashlyn. Now, get out of here and take care of your family. I'll make sure everything is ready for you when you return. I hugged Mary Beth until she pushed me away, saying, Patrick, I can't breathe. Now go. Go where? I thought to myself. Suddenly, I thought of Katie. Thanks, Mary Beth. I am out of here. Take good care of yourself. I need you more than ever now. Mary Beth waved as I quickly strolled out of the office and out of the building. Running to my truck, I tore off for Los Angeles and Katie. It didn't take long to make LA at noontime. Soon, I was looking up at the tall skyline of the design company my Katie worked for. Once I found a parking garage, I marched into the lobby and asked for Stellar Wind's design studio and was directed to the 5th floor. Now, I am standing in front of an exceptionally gorgeous receptionist, asking if Katie O'Flynn was available. The beautiful redhead looked up at me with those exquisite baby blues and, biting her lower lip, asked, May I ask your name? Patrick O'Flynn. Any relations to Katie? Uh, yes, she's my daughter. Get out. There's no way a handsome stud like you has a daughter as old as Katie. Yep, I am afraid so. Can I see her? You most certainly can. In fact, I'll let you see anything you like. If you get my drift, Daddy? I must have turned 12 shades of red and gulped as she punched a button. Sam, what's up? I smiled at Katie's voice. There's a gorgeous hunk standing in front of my desk, and he says he's Patrick O'Flynn. He even says he's your father. Say it isn't true. I heard my daughter laugh and say, "Oh my God, Dad's here? Sam, stay away from him. He's off bounds. Understand?" "Oh, poo, fine. Just come and get him before I do." Sam stared at me like was beef on the hook while I waited for Katie. "Please hurry, baby," I thought as I gazed at those ravenous eyes. "Daddy, you're here. Oh my God, you're actually here." Katie ran into my arms and hugged me, then kissing me on the cheek. "Oh, save some for me, Katie." "Stop it, Sam. He's mine. Come on, Dad. Let me show you around." Holding my hand, she took me past the double doors into the back. Everywhere people were hustling around carrying reams of material and paper. Most of them were pretty young, about Katie's age. "What are you doing here, Dad? Does this have something to do with what Ash told me? Are you and Mom having problems?" Ash said something about a separation and maybe divorce. "Dad, what did you do? Why would Mom leave and want a divorce? Did you have an affair? God, Dad, why would you do something like that? What about Ash and me? Did you even think about us?" Katie's questions were rapid fire and nonstop as we walked along the corridor. People would turn and stare as we passed by. Finally, she shoved me into a small office and forced me into a tiny metal chair with a small wood seat and backing. Sitting next to me, she waited. "Katie, first, I am not having nor have I ever had an affair. I have never cheated on your mother. I've never even been tempted. So get that out of your head. Second, for some reason, your sweet, lovable mother has gotten the idea that I had, and she won't even let me talk to her. She moved in with your grandparents, and she is the one seeking a divorce, not me." "Oh my God, Mom's living with Broomhilda? Where did you hear that?" I asked, flabbergasted. "Oh, come on, Dad. Ash and I must have heard you say that a million times. You think Ash and I don't know that Grandma has never accepted you, that she wants you out of Mom's life? When and how did you girls figure that out?" "Shit, Dad. Ash mentioned it to me when I was 12 and she was 11. She noticed it first. After she confided in me, we began to watch the two of you. We were proud of the way you tolerated that witch. Sorry, Dad, but I've learned to call it when I see it. Ash and I knew that our dear sweet grandmother was a nasty witch that always tried to put you down in front of Mom and how she always controlled Mom." I just stared at Katie, marveling how my two girls had matured. "Well, somehow I'll figure out a way to get your mother to talk to me. Anyway, I've got some exciting news and I had to tell someone in the family." Katie's eyes widened with anticipation and asked, "What? Tell me, Dad. What is it?" I've been made full partner. The company is now McKinsey, Rawls, Forrest, and O'Flynn. How does that sound? What do you think of your old man now?" Katie just stared at me. I wasn't sure if she understood the gravity of my partnership. Suddenly, she screamed and jumped into my lap, wrapping her arms around me in a huge hug. "Oh my God, that's terrific, Dad. A full partner. Oh my God, I don't believe it. Does Mom know?" I just looked at her, my eyes rolling, and she giggled. "No, I guess not. But Dad, she'd want to know. I just know she would. You have to tell her." I shook my head and mumbled, "How am I to do that? She won't even talk to me. And she's under guard by Broomhilda. Maybe I can tell her?" "No, neither you nor Ash will say anything to her, understand?" Katie looked down and said, "Yeah, I understand." "Katie, look at me." My beautiful daughter looked up and looked at me. "Promise me you will not tell your mother. And you will not have Ash do it." "Damn it, Dad. Mom needs to know. Promise me." Reluctantly, she nodded and said, "I promise neither Ash nor I will tell her." "Thank you. Now can I take you out to dinner?" "I'd love it, Dad. Can I bring a guest?" "Sure, one of your friends, my God. Not Sam, is it?" Katie laughed and said, "No, not Sam, though you might not get out of the building unscathed. No, it's my boyfriend." "Boyfriend?" "Well, Dad, kind of more than just a boyfriend. We're living together." "What? Does your mother know?" "Of course not. You think I am suicidal? Jack wants to marry me, but I keep putting him off. I don't know if I am ready to settle down just yet, but I love the bomb." "What about Ash? Does she know?" Yeah," Katie said quietly. I swore her to secrecy. Shaking my head, I said, "Fine, better bring him along. I think it's high time I met your boyfriend. How about Lowry's at 7? Sounds great, Dad. I'll see you there." She again hugged me and planted a kiss on my cheek before she asked, "You think you need an escort to escape from the building?" I laughed, thinking of the receptionist. "Nah, I think I can handle it." Laughing, she replied, "I don't know. Sam can be a force in herself if you're not careful. See you at 7. As I walked into the hallway, I heard Katie punching numbers into her phone and I turned to stare. She grinned and said, "Only business, Dad. I did promise I wouldn't call Mom, you know." I nodded, grinning, and left. As I passed through the lobby, a voice purred, "I hope to see you again real soon, Daddy." I smiled at Sam as she blew me a kiss after she sensually licked her upper lip. God, I thought that woman would probably kill me in bed. "Take care, Sam," I said as I stepped into the elevator. Just as the doors were closing, she teased me with those smoldering eyes. I heard her giggle as I closed my eyes and shook my head. I drove around LA taking in the sights and decided to do a little browsing along the jewelry mart. It was amazing the kind of deals you could get with cash. Soon it was near 7 and I headed to Lowry's restaurant, known to have the best prime rib in the country. Katie and a young man stood by the entrance. As I approached, she spied me and gave me a big hug and kiss, then stepped aside to introduce to her beau. "Dad, this is Jack Hennessy. Jack, this is my father, Patrick Michael O'Flynn, the newest partner to the largest development company this side of the Rockies, McKinsey, Rawls, Forrest, and O'Flynn, Inc." I had to admit, the lad was handsome in a dark, rugged way. His dark brown hair was well-groomed, and I could see the intelligence in those hazel eyes. The young man was dressed casual, but well-chosen for the likes of Lowry's. "It's a privilege to finally meet you, sir," said Jack as we shook hands. "Jack, it's good to meet you, however. I prefer you call me Pat, okay?" "Yes, Pat. Katie has told me so much about you and Mrs. O'Flynn." He failed to see quick look exchange between Katie and me. "Let's eat," I said, wanting to move the topic away from Danny. After dinner, the three of us stood in front of the restaurant as Katie chastised me over her mother. "Dad, I agree with Ashlyn. Someone needs to tell Mom what has been going on. What grandmother has been doing to break you two up. God, Dad, how can you let her get away with this?" I sternly looked at her and warned her, "Katie, promise me you won't say anything to your mother. Promise me." She looked at Jack for backup, but he held his hands up and said, "Katie, this is a family thing. I am not taking sides in this." Katie huffed and spun back on me. "Okay, I promise, but you're making a terrible mistake. Katie, sweetie, please understand. Your mother means the world to me, but the last 4 weeks I've been less than dog shit to her. She hasn't told me what was wrong. She hasn't allowed me to explain or defend myself. How long have we been married?" Katie looked sheepishly at me and softly replied, 22 years. "That's right, 22 years. 22 years of good and bad, happiness and bitterness, love and heartache. That's what a marriage is. That's why they say for better or for worse. I love your mother more than anyone could ever imagine, and I believed she loved me just as much. That is why this hurts so much. Now, she allowed her mother to manipulate again. This time, getting your mother to go out with another man. I interfered with their date, this time, but no more. Now, she makes the choice, whether made on faulty info or not. Understand? No, Dad, I don't and I won't. As far as I am concerned, you're both wrong, pig-headed and stubborn. If you two divorce, both Ash and I will blame both of you. Do you understand?" I sighed and looked into her eyes as I nodded and said, "Yeah, I understand only too well." "Okay, Dad. I promise I won't tell Mom, but don't let this thing drag on much longer or allow Mom to get hurt. If that happens, all bets are off." She came into my arms and hugged me, giving a quick peck on the cheek before she grabbed Jax and walked away. She turned once to stare and smiled. I laughed when she smacked her boyfriend in the chest and heard her say, "Nice way to back me up, ya butthead." I watched as she and Jack disappeared around the corner and then made for my truck. Soon, I was heading south back home. When I pulled into the drive, I choked when I saw the dark house. I didn't consider it a home anymore with Danny gone. I sat in the truck for nearly an hour feeling sorry for myself before I pulled my butt out and into the house. As I stepped in, I saw the flashing red light on the phone indicating someone had left a message. Checking the machine, I found 3 messages waiting. The first message was from that a-hole Bowman. "Mr. O'Flynn, you'll be happy to know Danny has agreed to go out with me again. I promise you, this will be a very special night. And yes, I'll provide proof, don't you worry about that. I thought you would like to know. I have reservations at Chez Ramon's and..." He almost giggled like a little boy with a new toy. A penthouse suite at the Hilton Towers. Make sure you don't interfere. I could hear the scorn in his voice. God. I wanted to reach through that phone and rip his lungs out. Chez Ramon's was a very expensive and exclusive French restaurant that was hard to get reservations with, and the Hilton Towers was the most prestigious hotel in the area. He knew he was at war and was setting strategy and battle line. The second call was a surprise. Danny? She sounded sad and lost. Patrick, I can't see any way around this. I thought you loved me. I am going to see a lawyer Monday. Damn it, Pat, why? She was crying when she hung up. Olivia, I thought, I promise you one thing. Whether Danny and I are able to work through this, you are history. I slammed the phone down and was going to ignore the third message, but changed my mind. This one was unexpected. It was from her father, Harvey. He wanted to meet with me tomorrow noon at my office. I wondered what he wanted. I thought back to Danny's call. Was I wrong in the way I am handling all this? I was beginning to doubt myself and Danny's love for me. I made for the liquor cabinet and grabbed the Jack Daniels. The only thing I wanted to do right now was drown out these voices in my head, and JD was just the thing. It wasn't long before I heard someone groaning. A bright light blew my retinas when I cracked my eyelids open. I felt like one of those observers during the 50s nuke tests, nothing but a flash of brilliant white light. I threw my left hand over my eyes and found myself staring out the living room window at the sunrise. Hell, where am I? When I turned my head, my brain exploded in pain and I grunted as my hangover took control. I was on the couch covered up in a blanket. Now who the hell threw a blanket over me? I felt my stomach rumble, and that familiar feeling I get before I had to pray to the porcelain god began to course through me. I tossed the blanket on the floor and crawled off the bed so I could stumble into the bathroom. I just made the toilet as I vomited into the bowl. I just wanted to curl up and die. I rested my chin on the toilet rim and closed my eyes. I didn't want to budge. This was my spot, my chosen location to die. Jesus, it smells like shit in here. What did you do? Blow both barrels at the same time? God, Pat, the only time you're like this is JD. Drink the whole bottle this time? Leave me to die in misery alone, you witch. I croaked through the drool. Haven't you done enough to me? I couldn't turn my head to look at what was once the love of my life. I heaved more of my stomach into the commode. Me? You mean you don't you? I wasn't the one to set up house with my best friend. Danny, why the hell are you here? You wouldn't talk to me then. You wouldn't tell me what I did to upset you. You wouldn't let me try and defend myself. You leave to live with that witch of a mother of yours, and you start dating other men. Then, you leave a message saying you're going to see a lawyer, which tells me it's over between us. So, I ask you, what the hell are you doing here? Get whatever you need and let me die in peace. Okay. Without saying a word, Danny turned and left. Thank God. I thought as I retched yet again, offering further sacrifice to the gods. When I finally got control on my stomach, I managed to push myself up and stand. Wobbling a bit, I made my way into the bedroom and tripped, falling against the corner bedpost before everything went black. Deja vu. I moaned as I gradually opened my eyes to the sound of tones and beeping and darkness. I was lying on my back, on a bed in a small room, reaching over with my right hand. I could feel tubes running from my left arm. Not again, I groaned. I am in a goddamn hospital. What the hell did I do now? Alcohol poisoning? Nah, I vaguely remember tripping over something when I stumbled into my bedroom. But how did I end up here? Was Danny there? I thought I dreamed her nagging me as I was bent over the porcelain bowl. I was sure of it. Hey Slick, back with the living? Remind you of anything? Danny chuckled. You always had a way of impressing me with your graceful ways. How did I end up here? I muttered, closing my eyes. Well, after you decided to empty an entire bottle of Jack's finest amber, you managed to crawl into the bathroom to empty anything you ever had in your system into the toilet and other obvious locations. Afterwards, you tripped over those gunboat-sized shoes of yours and smashed your head against the corner bedpost. How your noggin found that tiny extended corner, I'll never know, but you opened up your cabeza pretty good. Blood everywhere. God, Pat, but you were a gusher. I really thought I might have lost you this time. I turned you over and shoved a compress over the wound in your scalp and called 911. Why? Why what? I could tell from the tone of her voice she knew what I meant. Why were you at the house? Why did you take care of me? Why are you still here? Shit, Sherlock, figure it out. I know you're only a mechanical engineer, but I have faith you can form a solution, she said sarcastically. It was at that moment I lost it. I'd had it with her and her temper, her sarcasm, her mother, everything. I was done with it all. Danny, You win, I lose. Get your lawyer. You can have everything, anything you want. You want it all? Take it. I don't care anymore. Believe whatever you want. The moment I am out of this room, I am gone. You can have the house, the money, the savings, everything, okay? Just go. Leave me alone. Please? Go back to your lover boy, Ted Bowman. Your mother will love that. I won't be around anymore for her to bust my chops. Just remember, after the dust settles, who was behind all this? I tried to get up, but my head felt it would implode, and I lay back down muttering under my breath. Danny left again, without saying a word. Seconds later, a soft voice said, "Mr. O'Flynn, you must remain still." I felt warm hands over my arm and forehead checking the connections and dressing. She must be my nurse. I am sorry. I was having a little discussion with my soon-to-be ex-wife. I guess I got a little upset. You mean the woman that just ran out of here? Yeah. What did you say to her? She was in tears, sobbing as she ran past the station. Nothing really. I just told her I give up, she won. That soft voice continued in a whisper. For someone who won, she looked so sad, so defeated. Really? She was crying? Oh yes, I've seen it before, but usually for someone who has lost a loved one to illness. She must love you an awful lot. I didn't say anything further. The nurse fussed over me for another minute, but before she left, she touched my cheek and said, "Don't give up on her." A tear trickled down over my face, and I began to cry. I hid my face in my arm and began sobbing. All my anger, frustrations, all my heartache boiled to the surface. Sweet Jesus, maybe they were conspiring against me, my wife, my girls, this nurse and God. I felt her fingers gently run through my hair. When her palm grazed my ear, I grabbed it and held it against my wet cheeks. When I realized what I was doing, I quickly released her, apologizing profusely. "Geez, I am so sorry. Really, I shouldn't have." "Shuh," she whispered tenderly and delicately wiped the tears away. My eyes snapped open in astonishment when her velvet lips brushed mine. "Wah. Please, Patrick, don't turn me away, please." "Danny? I thought you'd left." I was. I made it to the lobby before I mustered up enough courage to come back. "Patrick, I don't care what you did. I only know I can't live without you. But, can you love me enough to come back to me? Can you live without Crystal? I want you back, but you have to be only with me, Patrick. Can you do that?" Danny was sobbing along with me. I grabbed her and pulled her down, my arms enfolding this woman that drove me nuts. I wanted to tell her nothing happened between me and Crystal, that her mother made the whole thing up, but I didn't want to lose what we had right now. I was afraid if I told her everything I knew, she wouldn't believe me and leave. Having her in my arms, both of us together again, I didn't want to lose it. Finally I said, "Danny, I will do anything you want. I need you beside me." She hugged me, pulling me tight against her, her lips crushed against mine. "God, I love this woman. God, Pat, I've missed you so much. Can I come home?" "Danny, as far as I am concerned, you never left. We'll go home together. I'll wait until they release you, Patrick. You need anything from your parents?" "No, I don't want to go there. I'll wait here with you." "Okay." "Danny?" "Yes, my love? I need you to call your father. He wanted to meet me at work today at noon. Tell him I can't make it." "Dad, why did he want to see you?" "Don't know, Danny. Do you know anything?" Danny was quiet for a moment. "Maybe because of Ted Bowman." "What about Bowman?" She was reluctant to tell me something I already knew, but she didn't know I was aware of her date. I let Mom talk me into allowing Ted to take me out to dinner. She was convinced you were cheating on me, and I should get even. I was so confused I didn't know half the time what I was doing, Patrick. I am so sorry. I went out with him one night, but it turned into a fiasco. Some drunk picked a fight with Ted, and pretty much ended the evening for us. Pat, I wasn't going to do anything other than have dinner with the man. I knew what he wanted, but I wasn't going there. You believe me? I nodded and said yes. Was that the only time you went out with him? She quickly nodded but added, he did invite me to go with him to Chez Ramon's. I have to tell you, Pat, I was almost tempted. I've never been to Chez and I was dying to see it. He was pretty upset when I told him I wasn't interested. So was Mom. When she wouldn't let it drop, that was when I went home and found you on the couch. Did you put the blanket over me? Danny smiled and nodded. I saw the empty Jack Daniels bottle on the floor. I knew you'd be out until morning, so I covered you up and slept in the bedroom. When I heard you in the bathroom, I tried talking to you. I wanted to help you, but you were so angry. I fled back to the bedroom. I was on the bed when you stumbled in and fell against the bedpost. Oh, Patrick, I was so frightened by all the blood. I thought I'd lost you." I ran my hand over her hair as I held her close. "Well, you didn't. You rescued me again. I always seem to fall for you." She laughed at my pun and kissed me. The next day, I was able to leave the hospital. They only held me over for observation in case I had a concussion, which I did, but a mild one. They wheeled me out of the lobby and Danny was standing there waiting by the car. Once free of the hospital, she drove me home. We didn't say anything until she pulled into the garage. "Patrick, why don't you go into the bedroom and get some rest? I'll be back shortly." "Why? Where are you going?" "Oh, just have some unfinished business to take care of. Nothing important. But I want you well rested for tonight." I admit I was a little leery. Danny seemed to be up to something. "Danny, is everything good between us now?" She hesitated before looking at me and said, "Yes, everything is fine. Now, get some rest. Take this prescription medication and get some rest. I'll see you in a bit." She leaned over and kissed me and waited as I got out of the car. I watched as she backed out, wave and drive away. I went inside and shuffled into the kitchen grabbing some aspirin. Downing 3 of the pills, I nabbed a glass of ice water and moved into the family room, settling into my recliner. I read the label for the prescription medication and noted it said to take only 1. "Shit, this is some potent stuff," I thought. "I don't need this right now." Sipping some of the water, I eased back and closed my eyes. Within minutes, I was out. "Shoo, be careful with him. I don't want him hurt." "Oh God. All right already. Help me with him. He's not a lightweight." I don't know how long I slept, but I could hear my wife and someone else talking and trying to pull me out of the chair. They must have thought I had taken the meds and was safe to move me. Something wasn't quite right about all this. Who the hell was the guy? I decided to play along and see where this led. "Shit, Pat. I forgot how big you are," said my wife, sounding 3 sheets to the wind, as she and her companion carried me down the hallway and into our bedroom. They laid me onto the bed and, with Danny pulling from the other side, the guy pushed me into the center. "Now what?" she asked. "Now, we tie him to the bed. And make sure the rope is tight. When he sees me screwing you, he's going to want to kill us both," her companion said. "God, am I doing the right thing? He screwed another woman, and you're going to even the score. Come on, Danny. You want him to see how it feels to see his wife screwed by another man. Once we do this, maybe we... you can finally move on." I didn't hear her reply, but felt her little toe-a-die grab my left hand and wrap cord around my wrist. Before he realized what was happening, I curled my hand around his wrist and twisted hard. I was satisfied by the sound of a snapped wrist and a piercing scream. Holding the screaming a-hole, I scrambled off the bed and stared at a surprised, frightened, and suddenly sober Danny. "You stupid witch. You royally screwed the pooch this time, Danny. And here I thought things were going to be good with us, but no. You just couldn't believe the man you supposedly loved these past 20 years, could you? Well, Danny, let me tell you what's been going on. Your sweet loving mother set us up, or at least you. You stupid 304. Olivia paid Crystal $10,000 to pose for some sleazy private investigator. He doctored the photos to make it look like your close friend, Crystal, and I were having sex. Crystal was paid by your mother to cheat you. You are crazy, Pat. My mother would never do that. You're trying to deflect the blame for what you and Crystal did and, like the chicken scumsucker you are, won't admit it." I stared at her, fury and rage twisting the woman I loved into a something repulsive. I looked at Ted Bowman kneeling on the floor holding his injured limb whimpering like a baby. He flinched as I stepped over him for the closet, reached in and slid my hand into the pocket of my jacket. Pulling out my voice recorder, I threw it at her. "When you have the time, listen to what you refuse to believe, you stupid witch. I am out of here. Make sure you and this lowlife piece of shit is out of here by the time I get back." I looked at Ted and shook my head in sympathy. "You dumb shit. I told you what would happen if you tried anything funny. All bets are off now. You're on that recorder too. You dumb shit. Oh, and both of you. Don't worry about destroying that recording. I've got copies for my lawyer." Stomping into the kitchen, I grabbed my bag from the hospital, snagged the keys to my truck, and bolted from the house. Seconds later, the neighbors heard the screech of my tires as I tore out of the neighborhood. Danny stood there, her chest heaving as she seethed from the confrontation with Patrick. That son of a witch has the audacity to blame my mother for his screwing around, she angrily thought. "Hell, my wrist hurts," cried Ted Bowman still on the floor next to the bed. Danny stared at the moaning Ted and moved toward him, helping him to sit on the bed. "Here, let me look at that. Oh God, I am so sorry, Ted. Pat must have fractured the wrist when he grabbed you. We'd better get that looked at." Still holding the little voice recorder, she stuffed it into her pocket and helped Ted to her car. At the hospital, she waited as his wrist was x-rayed and then sat with Ted until the doctor returned. "Mr. Bowman, it's not fractured, just a simple sprain. Let me wrap this wrist and take this. It's a prescription for an inflammatory." "Doctor, you sure my wrist isn't broken? I am in a lot of pain here." "It's not broken, Mr. Bowman. When you get home, wrap some ice around it to stop the swelling. In a few days, it should be better." "Thank you, doctor," said Danny as she followed a grumbling Ted from the ER room. "Ted, let me take you home. Your car is at my mother's, but I don't know if you can drive." Danny saw Ted smile and nod, saying, "Thank you, but I'd rather get my car. Besides, I think you need a friend tonight." "Thanks, Ted. I'd like that." As she pulled into her mother's driveway, her mother came out. Danny could see she had been crying. "Mama, what's wrong?" "It's your father." "Daddy? What's wrong with Dad? Is he all right? Where is he?" Danny was running to her mother as she asked about her father. He has left me," her mother wailed. "What, why?" I don't know," simpered Olivia as Danny helped her into the house, Ted following close behind. "We had a fight, and he said he had had enough, packed a suitcase and left. He wouldn't tell me where." "Mom, you must have some idea why he would just leave like that. What was the fight about?" Danny helped her mother into a chair, and she went into the kitchen to get her a glass of water. When she returned, she again asked, "What was the fight about?" Olivia's red eyes stared up into her daughter's and sobbed. "Mom, tell me, what happened between you and Dad? Tell me." It was over you and Patrick," she wailed. "Me and Patrick? What about me and Patrick?" asked Danny. "I told him Patrick didn't deserve you, and that he cheated on you and refused to confess his affairs. Your father disagreed and said I was trying to set Patrick up, trying to railroad him into a divorce. He wouldn't believe me when I told him how wrong he was. We got into a horrible fight, and he packed up and left me." "Oh, Danny, your father left me." Danny was blown away by all this. What was going on? She thought. First, Crystal tells her about her affair with Patrick. Despite photos and Crystal's confession, Pat denies ever touching Crystal. Then, her moving in with her parents and agreeing to go out with Ted Bowman. Shit, what a disaster that was. Somehow, she knew Pat was involved with that little fiasco. Finding Pat in the house, unconscious. Getting Ted to help her get even, and now her father leaving. Leaving her mother with Ted, she went into her room and closed the door. She fell on the bed and started crying. She missed Patrick something terrible, but how could she forgive him without getting even, making him understand her pain? Danny heard a soft knock at her door. She sniffled, hearing Ted's voice gently ask, "Danny, you all right? Can I come in?" A second later, he opened the door and stepped into her bedroom. After entering, he closed and locked the door. She felt him sit on the bed and begin to rub her shoulders and neck. His touch felt good. Still sniffling, she could feel his palms travel down her back and slowly back up. She moaned as his fingers moving all over her body. A gentle kiss fell on the back of her neck and continued along her shoulders. She felt herself becoming excited as Pat began to fondle her. Wait, it wasn't Pat, it was Ted, and he was the one touching her, kissing her. Not her husband. "What the hell are you doing, Ted? Get out of here." "Come on, Danny. You know you need this. Forget about Pat. He's with someone else by now," crooned Ted as he slid his hand. "Besides, weren't we about to do this earlier in front of your husband?" She spun around and kicked him off the bed, Ted flying backward, striking the wall. "I said get the hell out of here. I made the mistake of getting drunk and listening to you and Mother. But, no more. Get out," she screamed. Ted looked at her dazed, then scrambled up, throwing open the door and running out. Seconds later, her mother ran in and cried, "What's wrong? Why did Ted run out of the house?" "Mom, he was trying to seduce me in my bedroom," she sobbed. "Danny, the man likes you. He wants to be with you. Danny, he's a fine catch." Danny turned and stared in shock at her mother. "What? You approve of what he was trying to do? To have sex with me? Now? In my room? Please leave, Mother. I want to be alone. Now, baby. Please leave, now, Mother." Olivia was startled by her daughter's demand and stood. "Well, when you're feeling better, call me. We need to talk." Olivia looked down at her daughter before she left the room. Danny immediately got up and shut the door, making sure it was locked. Danny was so confused. Ted was right when he said they were going to have sex in front of Pat, but she had been so angry at her husband then. She didn't feel that way now. What the hell is going on? She sobbed. She sat up and straightened her clothing. As she smoothed out her pants, she felt an object in her pants pocket. Reaching in, she removed a small silver voice recorder. What did he mean by "listen to what I refuse to believe"? She thought. She sat on the edge of the bed and turned the recorder on. Immediately, she recognized her friend, her ex-friend, Crystal's voice. Danny sat there dumbfounded by what she heard. Patrick was right all along. Her mother set her up. Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my God. Patrick, what have I done? She cried. Danny fell back on the bed, her face shoved in the pillow, muffling the sounds of her bawling. Soon, she had fallen asleep. A rap on the door failed to rouse her as her mother tried to enter. Danny? Danny, you all right? Not receiving an answer, Olivia picked the lock and found her daughter fast asleep. It was evident she had been crying for a while. As she approached, she shook Danny's shoulder, but her daughter didn't stir, but she did notice an object clutched in Danny's fist. She gently pried the device away and wondered what it was. After a moment, she understood it was a voice recorder or player. Pressing a small button with a green arrow, she frowned when she heard her son-in-law's voice emanate from the recorder. As she listened, she gasped as she heard Crystal's voice telling Patrick about how his mother-in-law set him up. She told him about the private investigator, the doctored photos, and the 10,000. She screamed when she next heard Ted Bowman's voice explain what Olivia had tried to do. Oh my God, she thought. No wonder Harvey left her. And now she would lose the only thing precious to her, Danny. Despair quickly turned to rage and then hate as she thought of Patrick. He did this. He turned her family against her. Olivia shrieked and leapt off the bed, running to her own bedroom. She rummaged through the top shelf of her closet, finding her father's old Colt revolver. She remembered when he taught her how to shoot and clean the gun. Opening the cylinder, she quickly loaded the handgun with .357 Magnum rounds from the box of ammo her father gave her. Snapping the cylinder shut, she placed the 4-inch revolver into her handbag and grabbed the keys to the Cadillac. Time to finally take care of that scumsucker of a son-in-law, she thought as she ran from the house. Danny awoke when she heard the front door slam shut. For a moment, she thought her mother was trying to wake her and pulled her hands up, discovering the recorder was gone. She searched for the little machine but didn't find it. When she saw the bedroom door open, she realized her mother must have gotten inside. She's got the recorder, Danny thought. Shit, if she heard it, she knows she's been discovered. Dear God, what is she going to do? Worried Danny. I've got to find Pat. I had no idea of the latest developments. I only knew that I was belly up to the counter of the hold in the wall, sucking down dark drafts, caring less about Danny, her mother, or Ted Bowman. She wants him. She can have him. I am done with all of them. They could all screw themselves silly. That harpy of a mother-in-law finally got what she wanted, me out of her life. Think you had enough, Pat? The deep voice boomed across the counter and I stared into the enormous black eyes of Mike, a 6'5", 300-pound and one of my closest friends. Nah, I can still think. How about another Boilermaker? Sure, as long as you stay here the night, okay? Mike always kept a room open in the back for his close friends. Yeah, no problem. Just as long as I can no longer see my wife's face banging around in my brain pan. Then you can do anything you want with me. Mike laughed and brought me another draft with a shot of Jameson's Irish whiskey for a chaser. Ah, there you go, Mike. You are definitely one in a million. Okay, Pat. Mike walked away as I dropped the shot glass in the beer. Staring at the foam, I drew the glass to my lips and with effort tried to drown my sorrows in the cold amber liquid. It wasn't much longer before I felt someone pull me off the stool and help me into the back room in bed. The next morning, I opened my eyes and regretted doing so the instant my eyelids were able to pull away from the buildup of crust that tried to glue the two lids together. My eyeballs suffered a flash fire of blinding sunlight, causing me to cry out and squeeze my eyes shut. Back with the living I see, about time too. It's going on 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Groaning my frustration, I growled. What the hell are you doing here? I thought I made it very clear we were done, over, through, finished. Startled, I could only stare as Danny started crying. No, not crying but sobbing uncontrollably. What the hell? I thought to myself. Then, I remembered. I threw the recorder at her. She must have listened to it after all. Patrick sniffed. I am so very sorry. Please forgive me. Patrick, honey, heard the recording, did you? I asked scornfully. Between sniffles and gasping for air, she nodded. Yes, I heard everything. I still can't believe my own mother capable of such an insidious cheating of our marriage. Jesus, I am so sorry for what I put you through. She turned away and muttered, I don't deserve you, Patrick. I am nothing more than a vindictive witch. I closed my eyes, savoring those words. For the moment, I didn't give a rat's shit for her goddamn apologies. I had tried to tell her over and over she was wrong, but would she give me a chance? Well, screw her. Danny, you have screwed me over for the last time. I've always been number 2 in your life, and you know it. Olivia has done her best to try and break up our marriage, and now she may have succeeded. I sat up, moved off the bed, and began pacing around the room. You know, in many ways you're just like her. You jump to conclusions, won't listen to reason, and constantly disrespect me. The best thing that came out of this marriage is Katie and Ash, and they're old enough now to handle our separation and divorce. Divorce? Please, Pat, no. Why not? You were going to dump me before you discovered the truth. You were leaving me without any explanation. So why should I do otherwise? Tell me why. Danny sat on the edge of the bed, her face hidden in her hands, her body quivering from her deep sobbing. I love you, honey. I love you so much. That's why I lost it when Crystal confessed about your affair. There was no affair, Danny. I know that now, but at the time I didn't. She was very convincing, and she had those damned photos of the two of you. Pat, you know I don't know much about that kind of technology. I would never have been able to see they were fakes. I stopped pacing and stared at her. Why couldn't you just listen to me? Let me show you, Danny. I could have proved they were phonies, but you wouldn't give me the chance. That's your love for me. That's how much you really cared about saving our marriage. There was a knock at the door and Mike's filtered through. Pat, there's a guy here says he's your father-in-law. He's with Ashlyn. Ash is here? Damn it. She should be in school, I muttered. Okay, you'd better show them back here. Moments later, the door crept open and Ash peered around the frame. Sorry, Dad. Grandpa was trying to find you and called me hoping I knew where you were. I got concerned and came home. Right behind her was Harvey, looking sheepish and very sad. Well, come on in. Your mother and I were just discussing current events at the moment. Danny was still on the edge of the bed, trying to wipe away her tears. Mom, are you all right? Dad, what did you do? Ash looked accusingly at me when she asked, and her mother spoke out. Ash, he didn't do anything. I did. I forgot what comes with love. Trust. I failed to trust your father and made a horrible mistake, one that I might not be able to fix. So, don't blame your father for my mistakes. Ash quickly went to her mother, who began crying again and held her in Ash's arms. Pat, I need to speak with you, son. I turned and gazed at my father-in-law, Harvey. He looked haggard and worn out, his eyes full of hurt. Let's go into the bar. We can talk there. Ash and Danny need to be alone, I said, and, holding his shoulder, guided him from the room. Mike, I need the back booth for a while. Can you bring us a couple of beers? Mike nodded, and I hustled Harvey to the far booth. Mike followed with a couple of cold drafts and set them on the table. Pat, call me if you need anything. I nodded and said, thanks, Mike. You're a true friend. Okay, Harvey, what did you want to talk to me about? Harvey took a long swig of the cold beer and gasped. Looking down at the table, he said, I've just learned something that horrifies me and will undoubtedly anger you, but I have to tell you. It's about Olivia. She has been trying to Brea. I raised my hand to stop him and said, I know. She hired Crystal to tell Danny she and I were having an affair. Olivia got some trash PI to take some photos and doctor them to look like we were together. I also know Olivia tried getting Ted Bowman to attempt to seduce Danny, knowing if he'd been successful, there would be no way I'd ever take her back. Harvey was stunned. I guess he didn't know the extent his wife had taken to ruin my marriage. My God, Pat, I am so sorry for all of this. I didn't know about Crystal or any photos. I only knew Olivia had asked Bowman to woo Danny. I overheard them on the phone. I had picked up the phone to call work when I heard them talking. My loving wife was instructing Bowman how to handle Danny, to seduce her, and once divorced, he could marry her. I was sick to my stomach. I knew Olivia didn't like you, but I couldn't fathom she would go to such work to destroy your marriage. Harvey took another long gulp of his beer and hung his head. I reached over and patted him on the shoulder, saying, Harvey, I don't blame you. Of all of us, you and the girls are innocent victims in all this. Look, I know you love Olivia, and I am not asking you to do anything against her. Just don't interfere when I confront her with this crap she created. His eyes glinted with fire when he said, Olivia and I are through. I can't handle any more of her sick, twisted hatred of anyone that disagrees with her. Pat, I've left her and I am filing for divorce. I just wanted you to know what she was trying to do with Ted Bowman. I was going to tell Danny, but she disappeared just after I found out. I thought if I could find you, I'd probably find Danny. I called Ash, and she told me about the hole in the wall, but she demanded she go with me to find you. I am sorry, but I gave in to her. Ash is a very forceful young woman. I smiled. Don't I know it? She's got the best of both me and her mother, and probably the worst. Look, Harv, you're more than welcome to stay at our house until you get yourself straightened out. What about my daughter? Will you be able to forgive her? I sighed, my shoulders dropping. I don't know. Her love wasn't evidently strong enough for her to trust me. Harvey sighed. Pat, please understand. Danny was also a victim in this conspiracy. What would you have done if Bowman had shown up on your doorstep with photos of Danny and him? What would you think once he said he and Danny had been having an affair, and here's the proof? Harvey, I understand what you're trying to do here, but I would hope my love was enough to confront her before I jumped off the pier. Pat, please believe me. I have learned my lesson. I will never doubt you again. Please take me back. I spun around to find Danny and Ash standing just behind me. Ash was glaring at me. Dad, you've always taught Katie and me about forgiveness. What about you? I stood and stared into my wife's tearful eyes. Finally, that hard-boiled shell cracked. I couldn't help it. I held my arms out to her, and she threw herself against me, her arms in a death grip around me. Sobbing into my chest, I ran my fingers gently through her hair and whispered, God, woman, haven't you got a clue how much I love you? How much I need you in my life? She didn't answer, her head buried against me. Danny finally began to calm down and pulled away to look up at me. I love you, Michael Patrick O'Flynn, and you were stuck with me. I smiled at her until we were both startled by a scream from Ash. Grandmother. We all turned toward Ash, who was staring at the entrance to the bar. Olivia was standing there, a murderous look in her eyes. She began to move toward us, screaming my name. Patrick O'Flynn, you've ruined my life and everything I worked toward. You've stolen my daughter from me, and now you've taken my husband as well. Well, no more. She reached into her purse and yanked out a large blue steel revolver. Mother, no, screamed Danny. Ash was shouting at her grandmother to put down the gun, but she didn't heed either of them. She slowly advanced toward me, pointing the pistol in my direction. I pushed Danny away and moved to the side, away from Danny and Ash. Olivia, stop this nonsense, demanded her husband Harvey. Have you gone insane? Do you really want to kill the only man your daughter loves, the father of your grandchildren? Harvey stood between her and me. Harvey, move away. I yelled, but he ignored me. Olivia, you'll have to kill me first, said Harvey. You left me, Harvey, she cried. You deserted me for this son of a witch. He deserves to die for ruining our lives. Harvey stood a few feet away from her, the revolver held low but pointed at his stomach. Please understand, Harvey, it has to be this way. He has to die, and you won't stop me. I will kill you if you don't move. Using both hands, she cocked the hammer. The gun still pointed at her husband. No, Olivia, I won't move. I guess your hate is stronger than your love for me. In that case, I no longer wish to live. God damn you, Harvey. She lifted the handgun and pointed the barrel at her husband's face before she suddenly slumped to the floor, Mike standing behind her with a leather sap. He quickly reached down and grabbed the gun, carefully lowering the hammer. Shit, Pat, life around you is too dangerous. Mike gasped. The police are on their way. I said, thanks, Mike. I owe you big time. Danny ran up to the big man and hugged him. Thank you so much, Mike, for saving my husband, my father, and my mother. She pulled him down and kissed him on the cheek, causing Mike to stammer and run to his sanctuary behind the bar. While Harvey tended to Olivia, I grabbed Ash and Danny and held them tight against me. The thought of never seeing them again made me realize how precious they were in my life. All my anger and damaged ego fell away. The only thing important to me was my family. Olivia was taken into custody, but, after an intense psychiatric examination, was committed to the county mental hospital. She's been a patient now for nearly 2 years. Harvey, Danny, and Ash see her on a regular basis. Me, well, everyone, including me, agrees it would be better if I remained home. Katie did marry that young man I met in LA. She is 5 months along with their first child, my first grandchild. Katie's hormones would kick up once in a while, and she would go into hysterics thinking how close she came to losing me. Until she has the baby, she refuses to visit Olivia. Hey, I understand and agree. Danny and I are closer than we've ever been. There have been times when I have had to scold her for trying to suffocate me with her attention and love, but they never turned into fights. Those days are thankfully long gone. As for Crystal, she got her $10,000, but it came at a high price, her friendship. Danny told her she was no longer welcome and it would be beneficial to her physical welfare if she relocated in another city. If she didn't, she may have a need for that money for future dental work and facial surgery. Needless to say, She moved away a month later. Ashlyn is now working for a terrific engineering firm. Would you believe? McKinsey, Rawls and Forrest and O'Flynn, Inc. As for me, life couldn't get any better. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.